So a lot of you know that I have a master's in special education, and I am certified not to just teach children with disabilities, but to teach gifted children. And in case you didn't know, gifted children are considered to be in the special education program. And the reason that they're singled out is because, well, they're special. Either they have a higher than average IQ or a mind that just won't stop. And sometime around the 1970s to 2020, gifted and talented programs were a big deal, and they were called G.A.T.E. Now, a lot of you have already done research on MKUltra and the G.A.T.E program, and you think I might be fixing to talk about what everybody else talks about, but that would be where you were wrong. I am going to discuss how the CIA was actually looking for our newest scientist and beginning to learn a little bit about the human brain using America's smartest, most different children for guinea pigs. So let's start with what MKUltra actually is.
I feel like MKUltra is not something that everyone knows about, and I think if you live in the US, you should have like an overview. I'm gonna censor myself for certain words because I think, well, you know. MKUltra was the codename for an illegal human experimentation program run by the CIA from the 50s to the 70s, so it ran for 20 years in the United States of America. And it really is one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories because it sounds like it's made up, but it's not. They recruited scientists from Germany that got in a lot of trouble for things they did during World War II in Germany. They were war criminals, and they were brought over to the US to help with these experiments. Basically, the goal of this entire thing was to learn how to control other people's minds. Some of their methodologies were brainwashing, torture, abuse, isolation, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, drugs. Their favorite drug was LSD. Fun fact about LSD, it was actually brought over to the US for this program and accidentally created the entire LSD counterculture of the 60s. The stuff they did was so messed up that in 1973, when the program ended, the director of the CIA, Richard Helms, ordered that all documents about this project be destroyed. And so what we actually know today about what went on then is just a small percentage of what actually went on. We've had to rely on the little bit of documents that remained and the sworn testimonies of participants.
Do you guys know that in 1965, the Department of Education had over 2,100 employees and an annual budget of $1.5 billion? How much money would that be today? However, the Department of Education really didn't become a thing, guys, until 1979. And by the beginning of 1980, the Department of Education had consolidated several small federal entities and become the monster it is today. Now, up until about 1980, schools had a lot of choice on what they taught, when they taught it, and how they ran their own schools. In fact, schools were funded by local taxes. So if you wanted to send your kid to a better school, then you changed where you lived to an area that had, well, better homes, better jobs, better teachers, and your kid got a better education, which left low socioeconomic areas really bad. And that's where you get a whole lot of this, let's desegregate the inner cities to the suburbs, because that's just how America had set their school systems up. Local kids went to local schools run by local politics and local control. And I will say this, guess what didn't happen? We did not have any school shootings, and we carried guns in our cars because I'm a 70s baby. And when I went to high school, we would go hunting prior to school and then drive up into the school parking lot with those same things hanging in the back of our unlocked vehicles, and no one would have considered going into the school with one. In fact, it wasn't uncommon to raffle guns at schools to raise money for the school. But here comes Captain Save-A-Ho, and excuse my English, that's what the federal government thinks it is, and decides it needs to restructure how these little schools and these little towns across America have been doing it forever. And now schools are a hot mess. You've got failing school systems. You've got higher than average dropout rates. A third of the children in America cannot read on grade level. And every other week, it seems like a pow-pow goes off into school. So I'm not sure what gun-free zones do, but, well, makes you think, what did MKUltra do with the Department of Education where our children were concerned. And whether or not you like Donald Trump, you have to admit the man knows some dirty stuff is going on in Washington, D.C. And one of his biggest campaign rallying cries to the American people for his endorsement for president in 2024 is dismantling the Department of Education. Now, I want you to imagine the Department of Education is second only to the Department of Defense. So he's talking about taking down the second in command. But is there a reason Donald Trump is like, hey, you guys, let me destroy this for you when I have a chance, right? Like he warned us about the border, but everybody was saying he was being racist. Now he's coming after the Department of Education and people are crying, oh, he's racist. He doesn't want our kids to be educated. I think maybe what old Donald J. Trump's trying to tell you guys is that the CIA did some really wicked stuff to children using the cover of the Department of Education.
Anyways, like once or twice a week or something, every school is a little bit different. You get picked out of your class, right? And you go to another classroom that's special for these kids, right? And usually the windows are like blocked out and stuff. And you do all these experiments and tests and stuff like that. Like one of the things we used to do routinely was go into the gym and go into this huge inflated bubble thing. I'm not kidding you. I was in elementary school and there was only like 10 of us out of the whole school. We'd go into this bubble and this like lady who didn't even work at the school would come in and sit in this little stool inside this big inflated bubble, right? And like do these weird meditations and stuff with us, right? And like my mind never stopped, even as a kid, especially as a kid, and I would never go into meditation. So all the other kids would be like zonked out, and like I was just listening to this lady and she's always talking about floating and rainbows and now you're up in the sky and all this crazy stuff. It was wild.
I remember this vividly, and I want to share with you two experiences. One involves this hearing test and then another involves textbooks. So I remember that they would take us out of class, and now that I think about it, it was more frequently, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. They would have us listen to these headphones that were plugged into a suitcase. Now, a suitcase with some kind of a computer in it, and these headphones plugged into it, and what we had to do was they would tell us to listen for the tone on the left or the right side and raise your hand corresponding to the side which the tone played on.
The gifted program.
Mm-hmm. Gifted and Talented Education Program.
Do you want to talk about that?
I was in that program.
Okay. No wonder.
Yeah.
That was started by the CIA, the Central.
What?
Yes, bro. That's part of a MKUltra. Google this right now and call me a sucker, bro. Oh, he's Googling it right now.
D.O., were you in that program?
I was in a G.A.T.E program.
Thing, bro. They identified us as highly intelligent, and so what happened
Yeah, because it was all based on state
Now
standardized.
let's talk about tones and what you can do with tones and hypnosis. Yeah, you heard me right. So maybe them taking out the smartest, the brightest, the most outside of the box thinkers in the class, because let me make a point here. Being gifted does not necessarily mean that you're a straight A student or even an A B student. It doesn't even mean that you would standardize test highest in your class. Gifted children think differently. We are almost always on the spectrum of what you guys would call autism. What we called back then was odd. We're like, that kid's different. That kid is odd. That kid isn't normal. That kid is special. Okay? Also, almost always either ADD or ADHD, and sometimes, but not always, dyslexic, because their brains worked differently. Now, if you are not aware of what they are currently doing with brains and AI systems, get ready for me to just make you want to vomit and go curl up in your bed for the rest of the day, which covers over your head, praying that God comes back any moment. But don't do that. Because remember, God says in the Bible, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Baby, you ain't perishing on this platform. So watch this.
I could make a sperm out of your skin cells and an egg and fertilize that.
So you can clone me.
I could clone you. I won't do that because it's illegal, but biologically we could do that. I can make organs, mini organs from you and test bugs. What we're doing in the lab is we have, personalized medicine. When you come to my lab and you have to promise you're going to come, I'll show you we grow these mini brains in a lab. And we've got them from people that are predisposed to Alzheimer's or not. And we have a way to age those brains so that they're now 80 years old, even though they're only a few months old. And they lose their ability to fire electrically. They become demented in the dish, little mini brains. On Instagram, I've shown some photos of these. They're pretty cute. And so we give them Alzheimer's and dementia in the dish. And then what we do is we have the system to turn on those 3 embryonic genes, OS and K, and those brains go back in age. But here's the cool thing. Alzheimer's goes away. That electrical activity comes back. Now we do this in a mouse. We make the mouse older, just let them age out, or we accelerate it. And we've been now reversing the age of those brains in the mice. And you can guess what happened. They get their memory ability to learn back.
Unbelievable. Do you hear what you're saying? It's almost like, if you can find a way right now to stay on this planet healthy for the next 10 or 20 years, if you can
And that's not all, folks. They now have one state out of 50 that has decided to protect your intellectual data, aka your thoughts. You heard me. They can now read your thoughts. Now, where do you suppose they learned how to do all of this and learned all this about brains? Well, in the G.A.T.E program. So if you were a gifted and talented, educated student sometime between the late 1970s and the 1990s, you, my friend, were probably brainwashed. And I don't mean that it's had effects on you. But let me tell you something that's very unique to my generation. I went to a small high school, very small, like 79 of us graduated. We just had our 30-year anniversary, or, reunion. I just made 50. It was last year. We have lost a third of the students in my graduating high school to drugs. Like, drugs hit so hard in rural America in the 80s and 90s was unfriggin' believable. And most of us were in the G.A.T.E programs. Now, we came from Christian families with strong morals, upper middle class families. We had never been exposed to those lifestyles. Our parents were all still married after 25, 30, 35, 40 years. We didn't have abusive families. We had no reason to be drug heads as we got older. But it was almost like we have joked about it, like there was something in the water. So many of us went to jail for just stupid crap or got hooked on drugs and ended up overdosing and dying, and a lot of them by suicide from families with no history of it, folks. Do you know what I think caused it? I think the CIA played with a whole lot of American children's minds under the guise of the Department of Education. Let me tell you something. Anytime the federal government shows up to save you, run. So hit like, comment, subscribe. My name is Samantha. I run a 2-acre farmstead here in Southeast Louisiana. I'm all about that organic life, folks. Hammer's appointment, it is Monday. Hammer's appointment to see the LSU veterinarian for his illness. That's my German Shepherd. He's been extremely ill. He's going to see a specialist at the school, a veterinarian school at LSU, which is Louisiana State University, is for Thursday. But now we have a hurricane aiming at us. It might hit Wednesday. I don't care. But if you'd like to support our channel, YouTube took our money away because we speak truth here. There's ways that you could drop $1 to help us cover his veterinarian costs, and we would greatly appreciate that. God bless you guys. Stay awake, folks.
We did it! We integrated the tiny human brains we grow in jars into robots. Something that literally every science fiction series said will end terribly. Really, really terribly. A lab out of UC San Diego, the Maturi Lab, decided to let a little brain organoid control a robot spider in an effort to let it start to integrate with its environment. Initially, they found that unstimulated brain organoids fired around 3,000 times per minute, but when they stimulated it and allowed it to learn the environment, it ended up firing 300,000 times. This is a lot more similar to what we see in newborn babies. We already know that the brain organoids, even without stimulation, still end up giving delta brainwaves, which is the kind of brainwaves you see in a preterm baby or somebody who's sleeping. The brain organoids can form every structure in the human brain during development. One of the large issues with it is integrating it with a circulatory system, which we might be able to do inside of robots. Maybe one day my AI robot can actually love me. But in other horrifying dystopian news, we're actually able to use the genomes that we found from Neanderthals to make Neanderthal brain organoids to help us try and figure out how they differed from us or how similar they were.